Welcome to another live stream, and today we're going to be talking about the brand new Blackmagic PYXIS 6K because I haven't talked much about it yet on this channel, and I wanted to get your guys' input on what you think about the new camera. Is it worth buying? Is it worth the $3,000? And where does it fit in the lineup of Blackmagic cameras and kind of in the lineup of all cameras on the market today? Is it worth buying? So those are some of the things that we're going to cover today. And I'm excited because I got to actually see this camera hands-on at NAB. So I think it's going to be really fun to dive into. So as you guys are all kind of jumping in, leave a comment below. Where are you guys located at? I usually do these live streams at night, but doing one during the afternoon today, see if can get more people not so sleeping late at night. So yeah, leave a comment where you're joining in from. I'd love to know. All right, so let's see here. So here's some footage I took just out at NAB about 2 months ago now in April. And the camera, you know, you haven't really seen anyone actually filming with this camera yet because it's not actually out yet. It's going to be shipping this month. Excuse me, it's supposed to be shipping this month in June. I believe around June 15th or something. We'll have to look at the website to just double check, but orders should start being fulfilled soon from B&H and Adorama and things like that. So it's going to be really exciting to actually see some footage shot with it. I was able to get my hands on it, kind of play with it, take it apart, you know, touch the different buttons and things on it, but not actually shoot any footage. And I haven't really seen any real examples yet of people doing that, but yeah, we'll see. Hopefully I can get my hands on one soon. So the real question here is, you know, what is the Blackmagic PYXIS 6K and should you buy it? You know, what's the point of this camera? So I want to dive right into that and start answering that. If you have questions as we're going through this, please, like I said, leave them in the comments below. What's up to everyone that's joined so far? Dollar Edits, Arun R, PNW Motion. Thank you guys for joining. So this camera is a 6K camera, as you can see from the title of the video, and as you probably already know. So it's a full frame sensor, which is of course fantastic because Blackmagic has been doing so many crop sensor and even micro four thirds sensors for so long that it's been really nice to see them come out with more cameras that are full frame sensors. This obviously wasn't the first one. We had the Blackmagic cinema camera 6K that was full frame about a year ago now, roughly, that it was launched. And then they have some of their other Ursa ones that are now full frame as well. So that's really, really exciting to see them actually get into the full frame game because, you know, that may be something that has kept some people from getting into this camera. I know for me, I've owned the Pocket 6K Pro and I've used the 6K the 6K, the 6K Pro, and the 4K. Used all those cameras over the years and really liked them all, but the biggest problem for me was that it wasn't full frame, and I really like that full frame look for many different reasons. Of course, because you get that nice shallow depth of field with lenses that you don't have to have as wide open of an aperture as you do on a crop sensor, as well as the full frame sensor tends to do better in low lights. There's just a lot of advantages to it. So I'm really, really happy to see them go full frame. And what's cool about that is I think to their competitors, you know, this is supposed to be kind of a box camera. Now, it's not a perfect cube like you've seen with like the Movo or the Komodo cameras, the Komodo X, the Komodo cameras. Those are all more of a cube shape, like a 4x4 or 4x5. This one's definitely quite a bit larger. Once I got my hands on it, I realized, okay, this is actually a pretty big camera. I'd say it's more similar size to the Pocket, or excuse me, it's more similar size to the Sony FX6, which I've got back here. Let me grab that. So here's my FX6 camera, and let's see, I'll turn it to the body side here that you can see. The new Blackmagic PYXIS 6K body is honestly pretty similar size to this. I'd say it's just a tiny bit shorter, but in terms of actual like width, height, everything, it's very similar to this. Obviously I've got this pretty built out, but if it's hard for you to tell actual size and dimension, it can be really difficult to tell sometimes just in video. It's it's about that size. So this is a bigger camera. It's not a small little cube camera like the Komodo, like I was saying, or the Movos and stuff. It's not tiny like that. Now, everyone's been begging for a box camera from Blackmagic, and we finally got it, right? This is what we've all been asking for. And it's kind of funny because it's what, you know, we've all been wanting, but then now that it's out, is it what we actually want? Is the PYXIS 6K what we were really wanting? And for me, it's a yes and a no. The full frame image, absolutely. 6K, absolutely. And I do like the fact that it can be built out more like a traditional cinema camera, just like the Sony FX6, where you can just build it out. You know, I've got a top handle on here, side grip, everything like that. This can be built out very, very similar to that, but it's got some pros and cons. You know, is it really the camera we wanted from Blackmagic? And talking to the engineers there, I spent a lot of time with them at NAB, and they seemed really, really, really excited about this, and they're really excited to see what creators do with it. And I am too. I'm interested to see where this fits in the market, if it gets widely adopted and becomes kind of one of the new cameras that's a go-to. Like the Blackmagic Pocket line definitely became really substantial in the market, so I'm interested to see how this does. My hunch right now is it's going to do okay. I don't think it's actually going to be as a top performer as they're thinking it is. Just because of its price point laying at that $3,000, where it's kind of affordable, but it's also a little out of range for some people that are looking more just like an affordable mirrorless camera around that $2,000 price mark. So kind of see where this one lands. All right. Hey, what's up, Greg Jones? Welcome back, dude. Good to talk to you again. Thanks for joining the stream, man. It was good to have you on. So yeah, this camera is definitely something really interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the design and build quality of the new PYXIS 6K. So this camera, you know, as you can see, I've just got this video looping, just some simple photos or simple videos I took at NAB. It's got a really interesting design. So let's see, I'm going to see if I can pull up their website here. Here we go. So here is the camera, a little bit better detailed. You can see it nicely built out. I really, really like the design. Let's see if I can get this video to play here. There we go. So as you can see, there are threads all over this thing. 1/4-20 threads, 3/8 threads, everywhere. They're really wanting this thing to be customized. As you can see right there, maximum customizability. So it's something that they really want you to build out your own. You see just all the threads all over this. And I really do like all of the parts that they've made in-house from Blackmagic. You know, you're definitely getting something that you could just buy their stuff. You could buy their top handle and their EVF mounts here. You could buy their little 15mm base plate down there, or you can completely buy your own parts and really make it custom, make it your own. And that's something that I'm happy that they've done. They realize that a lot of people like to rig out their own cameras. You know, if you're like me, you know that I love rigging out a camera and making something really, really my own. So I want to show you just a couple of the parts that I thought were kind of interesting about this this new build. Is this like EVF mount, for example. You could see me pulling it off here. Woo! Just it has like a little quick release on it. It kind of looks like it's almost like a NATO mount or something, and it allows you to just pull that lever and then slide the whole thing off the front of the top handle, or lower and raise it at whatever height you need it to be. And I thought that was nice, but it feels really, honestly, pretty overly complicated. I'll show you another video here of the EVF. See if I can find it. Here we go. It just seems like it's a little bit over-engineered, because the EVF is on its own little 15mm rod that comes out the side, and then it has two 15mm rods underneath connecting it. And I know they're going for adjustability, like, hey, you can lower the, like, up and down, you know, the height. You can go in and out, and you can kind of twist it and everything. But honestly, it seems over-engineered to me. And that's just coming from someone that's using the FX6. You could see here's the mount for the monitor, which also you could mount an EVF in a very similar way to this. A lot of people will put an eye loop on these. And so it's just, it seems, I've got the thing on here. So it seems really over-engineered to me when you look at the FX6. It just has one connection point. You just screw it on right here onto the side, and that's it. And then of course there's all the adjustability and all the hinges and everything. But what they've done is like added all these rods and everything to make it adjustable, and then the EVF finally connected at the end. But if I want to take this off, you know, on the FX6, you just unscrew it, and it's kind of like a rosette connection because it's got basically like little holes and everything, so you can kind of mount it any way that you want to. But that's it. I can remove the whole monitor, or you could see doing this with an EVF. And this seems really over-engineered to me. So it's not something that I would do. And when you actually look at the price of this thing, it's not affordable when you add that EVF. I think there's definitely some people that will use that sort of thing. Let me just pull up the website right now. I'll just go all the way down to the pricing on this so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Yeah, so the EVF right now, the Blackmagic Ursa EVF. So it's using the same one from the Ursa as they are for the PYXIS 6K, $1,700. So basically that's just a little more than half the price of the camera itself. So it's not something that's super affordable by any means, and it's probably something that I would skip out on. But you can see all these top rail mounts and everything, they're not going to actually come with the PYXIS 6K. So you're not going to get all those rods anyways when you first buy it. Even the top handle doesn't come with it. So for me, when it comes to rigging it out, what accessories would I buy for the PYXIS 6K? Absolutely the top handle. You got to have it. I think they're designed for it's really nice. It's easy to throw on there. I did think it was kind of dumb that they used 2 screws instead of just like finger tightening screws. For instance, the Sony FX6, I know I keep going back to it, but it's the camera that I use. It uses finger tightening screws. So if you want to take it on and off, you can just unscrew these and tighten it on and off really quickly, instead of using the little bolts. And the engineer, I asked him about that. I was like, why did you do that? Why didn't you just make them finger tightening? He said, well, that's just the same model we've gone with the Ursa. So we're trying to kind of make them cross compatible. So I guess that's the way the Ursas have their top handles mount as well. I don't think that's the best answer, but that's what he said. So yeah, Arthur says it's more similar size to the Red V Raptor X, almost same. Yeah, I'd love to see those two cameras side by side. I haven't seen any side by sides of the Red V Raptor X, but yeah, I would say that it's definitely bigger. The camera is not a small, light little cube form by any means when it comes to like the size of the Komodo and the Komodo X. It's a bigger boy like the FX6 for sure. It's definitely a pretty big camera. And something else that I wanted to dive into here, as we're kind of talking about this camera and its accessories, I think I might be jumping the gun a little bit, but I love talking about how you're going to rig this out. Got to get the top handle, skip the EVF in my opinion. I'm a person that uses the top or just the monitor itself, and then that rosette plate on the side I thought was really, really cool because it's just a quick way to add a bunch of accessories. It's only $59, so very, very affordable. And I'll show you. Let's see, I've got a clip of it here from NAB with the engineer just showing it to me. Let's see. Kind of doing this all on the fly, trying to show you the video clips from the event. So here we go. So there's the actual side plate there for $59. And what I like about this is they really are trying to make the PYXIS 6K very modular. So it's something that doesn't actually come with it. I think it would have been nice if they threw it in the box, but it's basically like, hey, if you want to buy it and you like our solution, go for it. It's easy to throw a grip on the side. I do love that because it's air rosette. So any of my air rosette like side grips will just screw right in, or even a shoulder mount. So if you want to throw this onto a shoulder rig and do arms off of it, off that one side, that's kind of nice. But it's cool because they've made it possible to add all different types of accessories to the side of it. If you don't want to do something like that cheese plate, they've got a whole bunch of other things. Let's see if I can show you a couple of the other accessories that I was seeing at NAB, and they've got them listed here on their website too. So it's nice to see how they're thinking that people are going to use this. So let's see here. Okay. So this looks kind of funny, but they've got the phone, just got an iPhone, and you could do this with Android too, just strapped in, mounted to the side of the camera. And I believe that these straps actually come with it. If I was looking at the listing right, it's going to come with those. And the reason for that isn't so that you can actually, record video to the phone. That's what I was thinking at first. I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. You wouldn't want to do that because there's just not enough storage. This is actually so that you can use, like it says down here, use your 5G or 4G data so you can do camera to cloud. So if you're filming and you want to get your footage right up to an editor or a director or someone remote that wants to see what's happening, they can actually just, you know, see that footage right away, and you can use your phone as that hotspot. So that's pretty cool. And then let's see if I can find it. There was one other spot here. There we go, for mounting an SSD. So again, these little Velcro straps actually come with it. It's kind of a bit of a cheap design in my opinion. I don't like straps like this on the side of my rig very much. I prefer something made of metal, but you know, there'll be a third party, definitely Small Rig or Tilta, or someone's going to make some little SSD slot that it slides into really nice, I'm sure. So yeah, this is definitely an option as well. It is nice that they thought that through because, you know, with the Blackmagic cameras, when you were shooting with the pocket cine cameras like I was always running my little Samsung T5 drive, and that you had to find some way to mount it. Luckily, Small Rig and Tilta and everything came up with their own little mounts for that drive. And so I would just mount those on with a little kind of metal bracket and tighten them down. But now, you know, they've got this where it just Velcros into place. Again, I guess it does the job. All right. So let's see. Nick Bryce, what's up, man? He says, Canon announced the C400 that comes with a USB-C monitor. Wouldn't be surprised to see it coming as well for the PYXIS in the future. Yeah, absolutely, man. So I need to watch some of the videos on the new Canon C400. I haven't been looking at that yet. I've been kind of out of the Canon space for a while now, since really getting deep into Sony, Blackmagic, and Fuji. I haven't been using Canon as much, but I used to shoot a lot on the C500 Mark 1 and 2 and 3 at the studio that I was at. But yeah, I need to take a look at the C400. And that is really something interesting that you've brought up about the USB-C monitor. So that's actually seems to be the way that some of these camera companies are going. They're not doing HDMI. And that's really important because the new Blackmagic PYXIS 6K does not have an HDMI out port. I'm trying to pull it up here, show you guys what this looks like. Here we go. So I know you can see some videos like this online, but it's nice to actually see kind of a hands-on. This is what I experienced while I was at NAB. So this is the display port in the front, and it is USB-C. They call it a display port, but the actual like connection is USB-C, and it just tightens into place. You know, you can keep it in place with that tiny little thread. That was really annoying to take on and off. I will say, I feel like they should have come up with a different locking system. That was just such a small screw to like loosen and tighten. But I guess once it's in, you're just going to kind of leave it, and it's not going to be something you're taking on and off regularly. But yeah, so that's how they are doing the EVF in this example, but it's also for a monitor. And I talked to them about that. I was like, I haven't used a monitor with the display port before, like USB-C. Pretty much every single monitor that I've used to date, which has been dozens and dozens of different production monitors that I've bought, tested, used on sets, they've all been HDMI or SDI. But I guess they're starting to make some with display ports. It just hasn't been something that I've seen myself. I haven't tested it out, but they did say that there are some like that. So I'd be interested to see if a lot of the new monitors coming out are going to support display port. But otherwise, you're going to have to use some sort of conversion. So going from this USB-C display port to HDMI, so you can just use a normal HDMI input on your monitor. Because yeah, right now you won't be able to just plug in your HDMI and throw a monitor on top of this. So I thought that was interesting. So on that note, let's talk about some of the other features of this camera, some of the ports and such. So like I've just said, it doesn't have HDMI, but it does have, of course, many other in and out points. And that's the nice thing about going with a bigger camera like this, is you are getting a lot of other options. So this has SDI in, it has SDI out, and well, so the SDI in is really timecode in. So you get timecode in, so if you need to sync it to other cameras, SDI out, so you could attach a video, a monitor to it easily that supports SDI, and then Of course, you have Ethernet, and that's for controlling the actual camera itself remotely if you want to. So you can tap into things like the Atom Mini Pro that I'm using for this live stream. I could plug that directly in, and then I can control some of the camera settings remotely. So really good for live streaming. I feel like live events, maybe churches, things like that might want to network these types of cameras. This feels like a good camera for doing that, for networking it and doing remote controls. And then of course you could see they've got the locking, like kind of LEMO pin connector, I guess you would call it, on the bottom for power. Very similar to the Blackmagic Pocket Cine camera lineup when you actually wanted to get that. I think it's 12 volt in, like DC 12 volt, something like that, plugged in. That locks into place. And then at the top, you can also see that USB-C port. And that is for the SSD. So if you want to record externally to an SSD, which is definitely how I would be doing it, you could plug in into that USB-C port up there at the top. So yeah, it has a lot of in and out features. I do like that. It's just funny to me they didn't just throw a simple HDMI on there, but I guess maybe this display port is just the new way, the way things are going these days. Yeah, and Greg Jones, the screw does look irritating. Yes, it really was. It was just so tiny and hard to unscrew and tighten for that display port. All right, let's see. Marani Lewis, what's up? Says, did you ask which battery capacity BP that was in the camera on display? Well, let's see. See if I can pause it. And sometimes it lists it on the back which one it is. Let me see. I'm kind of moving the camera around here a lot. Doesn't say. It was pretty deeply recessed in there, I will say. It's probably, let's see, 35 or 60. Yeah, I'd say it's probably the 60 that's in there, but I can't say for sure. It definitely had it was deeply recessed into the camera, so you're going to get a good amount of battery life. And that's something else that I think is worth mentioning is that the PYXIS 6K, I'm really, really happy that they ended up going with this type of battery. Thank heavens they didn't try and do a Sony NPF battery. I think we've all had terrible experiences with those. The Blackmagic cameras have done those. They've done the Canon batteries, and none of them hold a very long battery life. They're really, really terrible. Just like, I don't know, for me with the Pocket Cine camera lineup, I never got more than 30 minutes out of record time, like filming time on those cameras. It's always really, really short. But when I've been working with the Sony BP batteries, they've lasted much, much longer. Like I've shot on these on the back of the Sony FX6 because that's what it supports. I don't have one in there right now. I have a V-mount support, but the BP batteries have lasted me a few hours sometimes. Just kind of depends on how much recording you're doing, but they definitely last a lot longer than Sony NPF batteries. Man, that would have been painful if they did that. So I'm really, really happy they went with these BPs. And I think the reason they did this, I was kind of wondering, like, why did they do that? Why didn't they just throw a V-mount on the back? You know, like the Komodo X, all these cameras. Why didn't they just put a V-mount directly onto the back of it? And I think that was for a couple different reasons. One, some people don't want to shoot that way. They like just using the internal battery. It's smaller, it's lighter, it's more compact, and then they don't have to worry about buying and charging up these big, bulky V-mount batteries. So that's probably why they did that. But I prefer going a V-mount because it just, not only does it give you longer battery life, but it also gives you a ton of places to plug into. So you can plug in your wireless follow focus, your monitor, wireless transmitter, that sort of thing. So looking at my Sony FX6 here, this is a Sony BP battery that goes actually back in here. And you can't fit one on when you have the little Tilta V-mount plate on here. But I'm hoping that Tilta or some other companies come up with something pretty much identical to this. So instead of having the BP battery in there, your V-mount will plug in, and then there's this little cable that plugs into the bottom. So you can actually get power. This is for the 12 volt power to the camera, which you can see in this video is exactly the same. They've got a LEMO connection there at the bottom. So it'll probably be something like that where you connect a V-mount and then plug it into the bottom here of the PYXIS 6K. And then I'll just run V-mounts on the PYXIS 6K instead of these BP batteries. But if you want to keep it light and small, you could definitely do that. I've pretty much never taken this plate off of my FX6 since putting it on and used the BP battery. I think I've charged it like once or twice ever. It's just been sitting in the case forever. So I'm always running V-mounts, and I think that they intend for people to run V-mounts on this too. I'm sure people will come up with some some different nice adapters for it. So yeah, sorry to answer your question. I know that was very long-winded, but Marani, I'm not sure exactly which battery it is, but I did ask the engineers, like, can you use the biggest Sony BP batteries? And you can. He's like, hey, as far as you want it to stick out the back, you can. I'm sure you guys have seen those before. Sometimes those BP batteries get like 4 inches long or so, where they will just really stick out the back of the camera. It looks kind of funny, but he said you can use whatever size you want. So, all right, let's see. What's up, Nick Bryce? How's it going? He says, Visitech Canada is listing it to be released for June 19th. Okay, sick. So it's the day after my birthday. It's coming out. Man, I really wanted to order one, but I just got the new Fujifilm camera, the X100 VI. So it's kind of hard for me to justify. That was about just over $2,000 for that. And then this is $3,000. I was like, I don't know if I can afford to buy another camera right now, but we'll see. I've been really liking the Fujifilm, but I do want to get my hands on this. Either I'm going to see if Blackmagic can send one out for me to just get a review out there for you guys. You can decide whether or not you want to buy it, or I'll put in an order. So we'll see. Hopefully it gets out pretty quick. Usually Blackmagic's really good about that. There's not big delays or back orders on their stuff. Usually when they're ready to ship, they are ready to ship. So hopefully they do. What's up, Saeed? Thanks for coming in. All right. Let's keep moving down the line here. I got plenty more things to talk about. And if you guys want to throw any questions out there about the PYXIS 6K, definitely let me know, or anything else. All right, so let's see. Okay, I want to talk about kind of the quality and the build of this camera a little bit more. So first of all, it feels really solid in terms of the actual build quality. It is made of a machined aluminum, and that feels really quality. So I mean, you can see this on their website, but actually like tactily touching it, it felt good. And I think if you have used the Blackmagic Pocket line in the past, you know that it doesn't feel that way. It feels really kind of plastic, chintzy, like you can kind of like knock on it and you can tell it's hollow. That feel is definitely gone on the PYXIS 6K. This has like a really quality feel to it. And when I was holding it, I was like, okay, this feels good. You can tell this is solid. It's going to last a long time. Whereas that plastic on the Pocket lineup just didn't feel super great. But that being said, the PYXIS 6K definitely is not the most high quality camera ever. There's a couple places where I can tell they really kind of cut corners to say, and I think that was because they're just really trying to keep the cost down. So for instance, let's take a look at the little back covers here for the CF Express slots. And this just drives me crazy. If you guys can see that, these things are just completely made of rubber. They're just little silicone rubber covers, exactly like they're using on the Blackmagic cinema camera lineup, the Pocket Cine lineup. If you use those cameras, you know that the HDMI one just dangles there constantly because you always have an HDMI port plugged in. It's just dangling there, along with so many of the other ones. So one of the very first things I did when I got the Pocket cameras is I just pulled them off. They can be reinstalled. They just kind of go in. They're like dangling off on a little like thin rubber string or whatever, silicone string. You can put them back in, but it's kind of a pain in the butt. So yeah, I just thought they were really cheap. And I asked the engineer about it there. I said, hey, why did you guys do this? What was the point of going with these rubber slots again on like a nicer cinema camera that's $3,000 US? And he said, oh, that was to keep the size down. And I just was like, I looked at him, I was like, the size, like you could have just thrown a little tiny hinge there on the left or right. And it would have popped open and the size would not have been any different. So that didn't make a lot of sense to me. And I think that was just kind of their excuse. To me, I think this is cost savings. It's like, hey, you know what? We can save $5 per camera we build by having rubber instead of a little hinge and a plastic door. You know, I really think it was cost savings, which is just hilarious that one of their cost savings, instead of putting a nice flap on there, was to throw a little rubber one on there. I thought that was cheap. It's definitely something that I would probably just rip off. But I don't use CF Express. The cards are really expensive. They are solid, but they're pretty expensive. So for me, it is something I'm going to be using, recording to an SSD anyways. So I don't know. It's just something to kind of poke holes in, because it's like, why would they do that? But yeah, so go back to this image. You can see if you are someone that likes to use CF Express, you already have CF Express, go for it. I mean, they're showing a 650 gigabyte one here. These aren't cheap. They're very expensive, but they're super reliable and they are fast. So if you want to use 2 of them and you like that, you know, it's there. It's definitely nice. But for me, it's the SSD. I'm going to use the Samsung T6, T5, whatever it is, drive to record to, because you can get a 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte for just a few $100, and it has so much more storage. Now, the only downside of that, of course, is you're using USB-C, and so there is a chance of this cable getting pulled out here or getting pulled out over here. So that's why we definitely want to see some third-party accessories that will lock in the USB-C. Small rig had one that I used on my cage that would actually clamp down on the USB-C cable, and then if they build a cage, maybe they can lock it down here as well. So that's always a risk. I hear some people complain about it, or those drives failing. I've never had those drives fail. They're hard, solid state. So yeah, I don't see a big issue there. But yeah, that was just one thing I wanted to talk about with the build quality that felt a little cheap there. Other than that, the build quality of it feels really, really solid. So let's look at a couple of the other features that make sense. You know, going in line with Blackmagic and the way that they have been doing their cameras recently, they went with, of course, a mini XLR here on the front. And sorry, the camera's kind of moving around kind of funny here. I'm just grabbing a quick shot of it on my iPhone. Let me see if I can go back to the beginning here. There we go. So you can see the mini XLR there in the front. And, you know, the Pocket 6K had 1 mini XLR, and the 6K Pro has 2. So you can plug into 2. You do have to buy a little adapter. I had to buy a little adapter so I could actually plug in a full-size XLR microphone, which is a little bit annoying, but I understand they're trying to keep the size of the camera small, so using mini XLR instead. But it definitely seems like something they could have thrown into the top handle instead, kind of like the Sony FX6 does, and the Sony FX3. They've got it in the top handle, so if you don't need it, they could have put full size up there instead of a little mini. But I guess it's nice to have. There is only 1 channel, so this being a professional like cinema camera, you're going to want 2. And I thought that was kind of surprising that they only had 1 channel input, whereas on the Pocket 6K Pro they managed to fit 2. But this camera is actually bigger. What? The box body style is bigger than the Pocket 6K Pro, but they could only fit 1 mini XLR. So that was one of those things that kind of had me scratching my head, like, why didn't you put 2? But it just is what it is. I guess you could split the audio and put it on 2 channels, or you could plug in like the Rode Wireless Pros, which bring in 2 channels, and just plug it into the 3.5 millimeter jack as well. So yeah, definitely that I thought was something that I thought was kind of interesting. But overall, the build quality is really nice. That was just kind of a weird thing to me. All right, so let's take a look now at the actual different lens mount options, because this is something I've seen debated quite a bit. Like, hey, you know, if you're going to go with this new lineup, what is the actual best lens mount to go with? And for me, you know, I think the best option, honestly, is going with the L mount option, because L mount is their mirrorless option and it's the most universal. I don't have any L mount lenses, not a single one, but I still think this is the best option. Most of mine are actually Canon EF mount or Sony E mount, but you know, mirrorless to mirrorless never works. You can't put a mirrorless lens of one brand onto a mirrorless of another. That's impossible. You can't put a Sony E mount on here, unfortunately. But with the L mount, you could absolutely put the let's see here. With the L mount, you could absolutely put a adapter on there, is what I'm trying to say. Sorry. I just had a message pop up that was distracting me. So I was just looking at B&H to see what different adapters they have. And so if you buy the L mount version, you're going to be able to, of course, buy an adapter and throw your Canon EF lenses on there, or other mounts if you want to. So Sigma has their classic MC lineup of converters. This one's $250, and that's because it has electronic connections. So I did ask the engineers about this. I was like, hey, can you actually use like an adapter on there? And basically what he told me was, yeah, but we've never tried it. I was like, what? You guys built this thing and you never tried adapting a lens to it? And he just said, you know, we used the common, basically we used all the protocols for adapting for lenses and everything like that, for the pin connections. So he said, in theory, it should work. He's like, so if you throw a little adapter on there, obviously you can see the pins, connectors here at the top. If you throw one on there, it technically should work. It's like, we just haven't tested it. So he's like, there may be some manufacturers that work better than others, and I think that's pretty normal for adapters. So that's definitely what I would do. I would grab one of these adapters, maybe the electronic one if I'm putting on a lens that has, you know, autofocus or I need aperture control. But if it's a fully manual lens that I'm adapting, like some of my Canon EF cinema lenses, I would absolutely just buy this cheap one. $60, has no, you know, connections at all, no pin connectors, no electronics. It'll just allow me to throw a manual cinema lens on the front of the PYXIS 6K, and it's only $60. And there's other adapters as well. So if you go with that L mount, you could buy a couple different adapters if you wanted to go from L mount to PL mount. So instead of buying this, and I asked the engineers, hey, is this front part switchable? Like, is it, you know, hot swappable? Because you could see the little screws right here. Right, I can see 4 screws right there in the front. And you know, for them, the way they manufactured this was just, hey, which mount is it? Okay, unscrew, put this one on, like, obviously. But he said, no, it's not user adjustable, interchangeable. Obviously, there's going to be users that do it. But if they start selling these mounts, maybe, you know, obviously it's a sensitive part of the camera where the sensor's at. So, and there's probably some like ribbons or something you got to disconnect when you're swapping them out. So it's not super easy to do. But yeah, they're not user swappable. So whatever you buy, you're stuck with for now, as far as I know. And it didn't sound like they had plans to sell these adapters for the front of the camera. So really, you should buy what you need. If all of your glass is PL, just go for PL, you know. And if all of it's EF, I guess go for EF. But if you have a variety of lenses and you want to adapt EF or PL or other types, I would definitely go with the L mount mirrorless. It just leaves you the most options because you can use those adapters. So yeah, I've seen a lot of debate about that. And that leads me to another thing with this camera is I've seen a lot of people complaining, you know, why did they get rid of the internal ND filters? You know, the new 6K Pro has ND filters, you know, it has hard stop ND filters. Why on earth would they get rid of the variable ND filters? And again, that was something I asked the engineers. I really drilled them. I'm like, what? They were probably like, what is with this guy? But I sat at their booth for probably an hour just chatting with them. And I was like, okay, so why'd you guys get rid of the ND filters? And he said, oh, we just couldn't fit them. It was, you know, they were too big. We couldn't fit them into the small form factor body. And again, that was another thing that just had me scratching my head. Like, how could you not fit it in here? This camera's huge. Like, it's a pretty big body. You could have recessed the sensor back a little further. I know there's always like flange distance and things like that you have to keep in mind. You know, but I guess with the Canon EF mount, you can see here, like that flange is huge on the front. So you have space to put a variable ND filter in there. And so like if it was permanently Canon EF like it is on the Pocket 6K Pro, then it would make sense. Like, okay, it's always in there. It has this huge snout. And so you could fit a variable ND in there. But yeah, with it being L mount, it was harder for them to stick in there. Apparently, allegedly. I think, again, that's not totally true. I think the engineers are saying that it was too small to fit in there. But look, this is the Sony FX6. I'm going to do something you should never do, which is expose the sensor for too long. But there's a variable ND filter in this. And look at that. It's E-mount. So it's that flange distance. It's basically flat. There's no space, but there is just enough space for a variable ND filter to slide in front of the sensor. So they could have fit it into this body. This doesn't have a snout, you know, that sticks out any mount at all to put one inside of. And it works. So I don't think it was an engineering thing, honestly, that, hey, we couldn't get it to fit. Again, I think this was price. To keep that price just beneath $3,000, they said, cut the VND. People are going to screw it onto the front of their lens anyway, so they're going to use a matte box. And if they want to spend the extra money on a VND or a matte box, they can. I really think that's what happened here. It was price cutting to keep the price down. Because if they kept building this out, if they added a VND, if they added double XLR ports or that sort of thing, the price is going to keep going up and get into the price range of the Sony FX6, which I think they're trying to undercut. So this is $6,000 brand new. And the PYXIS 6K is half the price. So to get it down to half the price, they had to make some cuts somewhere. The VND was on that list, you know, and there were some other things that were on that list too. So I think that's worth noting. And even like to get it down to $3,000, you don't get the top handle, which with this, you get the top handle that has XLR input. You also get the side grip. With theirs, you don't get a side grip. You don't even get that little cheese plate. So they're just trying to keep that price down really, really low, which is nice because then you can build it out how you want. If you don't need the top handle or the side cheese plate or a grip or whatever it is, you can pass on those and just spend $3,000 and you don't have to buy their accessories that come in the box. So there are some advantages to doing that sort of thing, but I just want to say that I think it was a cost savings, the reason they didn't put the V&D filter in there. I know that was a big complaint from a lot of people, like, oh, I would never buy this camera because it doesn't have a V&D. And I get it, but for most of the time, it's something that I'm running a matte box with a V&D in it anyway, so it wasn't a big deal to me. I'm almost always screwing them on or putting them in a matte box on my lenses, so not a big deal. And yeah, Greg Jones saying, in theory it should work is never a good thing. Yeah, it's talking about the engineers with the lens mount adapters should work in theory. I always find that funny that developers and engineers sometimes won't test third-party things. They're like, oh, like we've made our stuff, it works. I'm not going to worry about anyone else. And it's like, well, everyone's going to be using it, but they just don't worry about it. Okay, so let's take a look at this thing powering on. So about a month ago, I was shooting on the red Komodo. And something I noticed about the reds, and for red users, I don't own one, but I was just using one for a shoot with the studio. They take a long time to power up, like almost a full minute. So here's me switching the camera on and then watching it power up. Obviously my finger's not in the shot here, so that means I had switched it on. It may have been a second or two and then it flicks on. So it takes a couple seconds for it to turn on, probably 3 seconds, maybe 4, probably less. Somewhere in that range, though, it felt like for it to kind of boot up was at three or so seconds, which isn't terrible. And this is something that is worth looking at. How quickly does it boot up? I think this is in pretty normal range. I would say the Sony cameras for me boot up the quickest, like specifically the Sony FX3, which I'm using for this live stream. Like you click it on and the screen just pops in like almost immediately. So if you're doing run and gun stuff, docu style, you need to be able to turn the camera on and off sometimes to conserve battery. And then be able to just click it on, oh man, I got to get this shot. I don't want to miss it, especially if you're doing events or weddings or something. Click it on and go. And you can do that with the PYXIS 6K. So if you were wondering about that, it's possible. Yay, it only takes a few seconds. It's not too bad. Whereas with the red Komodo, dude, I flicked it on. I was trying to get a shot and I was like, oh my gosh, this is taking forever. I'm going to miss the shot. It was like waiting for Windows XP to launch, It's like a full minute. It's like, holy crap. It just seems like for such an expensive camera, $6,000 to $10,000 for the Komodo X, they would boot up a little bit faster, but they don't. So luckily this is a quick boot. Just wanted to show that because it's something worth knowing. I haven't seen anyone else talk about the boot time of the PYXIS 6K yet. So it's definitely something that doesn't take too long. All right, let's see if I can show you the on-off switch here on the back as well. You can see what that looks like. It's pretty simple. Really easy, basic design. Just a little switch there on the top. That's it. So just flick it over and it turns on. That's it. So really, really simple design. I really don't see any issues with accidentally turning that off. It's kind of recessed into the body. And yeah, seems like a basic, simple design to me. So I'm happy with that. Let's see. Trying to make sure we're kind of covering everything about the PYXIS 6K that I can think of here. So some other things we talked about, the mounts, we talked about L mount, EF mounts. Let's see. Let's talk about the display on the side. So this is something that, of course, has absolutely gotten the most flack and the most attention from people is, why the display on the side? So let's see. Pull up my video of that here. And I think I have a lot of opinions on this. So the display on the side, it was kind of the hot topic around NAB, and since NAB, why did they put the display on the side of it? I think they did it for a couple reasons. One, they wanted to keep this form factor, like kind of this squarish rectangular shape. So if they put it directly on the back, that wouldn't make sense because that's where the battery goes, right? You want a V mount or their Sony BP batteries on the back. So you can't put the monitor here. And also it'd be too small because the body is not very wide. And so like on the Komodo, there's no monitor on the bottom. It's on the top and it's really small. And I've tried pulling focus on that. It's doable, but it's really hard because it's like a 2-inch display or whatever. It's so small, 3 inches or something. I don't know what it is exactly, 2 or 3 inches. It's too small. So they could have done that on this and put it on top, but then that top handle would have covered where the monitor is. So really the only place that leaves is on one of the sides, the left side or the right side. And if it's not that, then it's a flip out. And I think they wanted to avoid the flip out on this because that's what the Ursa has, right? So the Ursa has a little like flip out LCD that pops out the side. And I think it was just to keep the body size down. And again, this was when I asked the engineers, and that's what it seemed like, was just like, hey, instead of making it hinge out, having all that extra hinge and everything for that to work was going to be too bulky. So we just made it solid state instead of having it flip out, rotate out. So yeah, if you want something like that, you got to go with the Ursa lineup, and then you're going to get a rotatable, flippable screen. But it's not the worst thing to me. I will say that this is totally fine. Like you could see here, some people back there sitting, that in an interview situation, having the camera just like pasted to the side of the camera, or excuse me, having the monitor just pasted to the side of the camera is not a big deal, because it's something where you're the camera operator, you're making quick adjustments, you're making sure things are in focus, adjusting, exposure, that sort of thing, making sure it's still recording. And so you can see it. It's just right there on the side, and it's really easy to see. But obviously if you're standing behind the camera, now you see nothing. You're running blind, absolutely blind. So anytime you are going handheld or like throwing this on a gimbal, I guess that would be weird. It's such a big, heavy camera, but possible, I guess, depending on the gimbal that you're using, you're going to be running blind. So it's absolutely something that you're going to have to use with an external monitor. This is not something that you'll be using without one. So I definitely think, for me, I'm always throwing an external monitor onto all of my cameras. So especially if I'm doing handheld work and that sort of thing, I need a bigger display, a 5-inch display, so I can actually check focus and see my exposure and everything. So that wasn't a deal breaker to me. I was like, you know what? There's still a monitor on the side. At least you can see what you're doing. They didn't totally get rid of it. Like some of the little cube cameras, there's all different ones out there now, but some of them have no monitor at all. So I was like, I'm happy that they put one on there. It'll be useful sometimes, but most of the time I'm going to have to just mount an external monitor. Nick Bryce, to answer your question, what about sensor readout? That's a good question. I'm not totally sure. I'll have to look at the website here, see if we can see. I don't know if they give like how quickly it reads out or anything on the website. That might be something I'll have to dive into a little bit more. What I can say is that it's not global shutter or anything. So it's definitely going to do the normal reading the sensor in lines and such. So it's not going to be something super, super fast like you're getting with, the Komodos, the red cameras, where it just boom, full global shutter right away, reading the whole sensor. But yeah, I'll have to check into that to see what the actual read time is. Let's see. Yeah, there's a couple things on the website just about how long it can record for and that sort of thing with different frame rates, like that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't see anything about the read and write speeds to disk. So yeah, something I'll have to look into a little bit more. But yeah, just to kind of talk a little bit more about the display on the side, because I do think it's something that just so many people have been talking about. I really, really think that it's not going to be a deal breaker. I think people are going to get used to having it on the side and just throw a monitor on top. And you can see me playing with some of the buttons here. They've got a ton of function buttons on the side. So if you want to save some programmable things like bringing up zebras or white balance or something like that, you could use any of those function buttons. And then of course they've got all the play, start, stop buttons, things like that for watching playback. So lots of nice tactile buttons on here to make it just easy to use, and so you don't have to dive through tons of menus. That's something that Blackmagic does really, really well. Their actual operating system is really comfortable, easy to use. You're not like digging through thousands of layers of menus like you do on Sony. It's one thing Sony just has not gotten right yet, their menu system. Although they've tried to like improve it, it's still not good. It's still like just way too deep. it's like an engineer built it, and that's probably exactly what it is, where Blackmagic had like a nice designer do someone that actually knows UI and UX design their menu system, and Sony just had the engineers design it and call it a day. Yeah, so I was happy with that, and no issues with really any of the buttons on the side, the function buttons. Let me show you what the little record button looks like here. I think this is the only record button on the camera. I didn't see any others. Let me see. So it's just this little red button down in the corner. I didn't see any others, which, I mean, I thought was a little bit interesting. They didn't have more options. For instance, on the Sony FX6, they've got the record button up here on top, but there's also one on the side grip. Let's see if I can show you that. Here we go. There's one right there. So when you're hand holding it, boom, you've got it. And they haven't made a grip for the PYXIS 6K yet that has like any buttons or anything controls on it. So I don't know if there'll be a way to do that. Yeah, so I do think they could have added maybe another spot to hit record. That's like kind of all the way in the front left there. So depending on how you're holding the camera and doing clips, you got to like bring your finger down and push it down at the bottom instead of like somewhere up near the top, where on the Sony FX6, it's up on the top. Maybe depending on your holding, it's a little easier to hit as opposed to the bottom, but I don't know. Not a total deal breaker. I think it's fine, but it's kind of a weird spot. I feel like the record button is usually somewhere up on the top of cameras, a little bit more accessible than like hidden down in the front. I don't know. I guess that will keep you from turning it off by accident because it's kind of so far away there. Okay, let's see. So we've covered that, and the display, not a deal breaker. I definitely think if you want to get this camera that it's not really going to end up being that big of a bother. Okay, let's talk about B-RAW, because this is actually pretty important thing. So this new PYXIS 6K only shoots in B-RAW and H.265, I believe. So I'm trying to pull it up here so we can see actual what the website is saying about it, because this was something that to me didn't make a lot of sense, taking away some of the different record options that you have, that you had on the Pocket lineup. Here we go. So yeah, they just have Blackmagic RAW, which is obviously nice. It's a great codec. You can change the white balance afterwards. You can change the ISO afterwards. It's not quite like, red code RAW, which has even better, more adjustability than B-RAW, but it's, you can go and change, like they're showing here, contrast, ISO, tint, so on and so on after the fact with B-RAW. But for some reason they got rid of ProRes, which I really liked being able to use that on the Pocket lineup, that if you wanted to be able to just throw this right into an editor, specifically Final Cut Pro. Final Cut Pro does fantastic with ProRes, and they just got rid of that option. So I don't know why. I don't know if they didn't want to license it anymore, or it was some cost saving thing. Maybe they have to license ProRes every time. And so again, to keep the price down, they made it, hey, we're not going to offer ProRes on this. It's too expensive to pay Apple for the ProRes license or whatever. That's definitely a possibility. I feel like they were trying to cut costs, and maybe that was a spot that they cut costs, like, because they have to pay for that stuff usually. They have to license the tech to be able to use ProRes. Just like using HDMI, it's a licensing thing. I kind of laugh because I saw an Instagram post from someone, I think it was Chris Brockhurst, a few months back about HDMI and like seeing their booth at a convention. He's like, what the heck? HDMI is a company? And I was like, yeah, they built the HDMI technology. Now every single product in the world that uses HDMI has to license it from them to use HDMI port. It's actually like a real company. Like I don't know if it's what we would call it exactly, a company or holding or whatever, but you have to license HDMI. So that might be another cost-saving thing for PYXIS 6K was, hey, we're not going to pay for the HDMI license. Let's just use DisplayPort, which maybe there's no licensing fee for that. Just like there's probably a licensing for ProRes, and they decided not to do that. So all these things at the bottom line make the camera cheaper for you, the consumer, which is great. But the problem is, do you want that cheaper camera if it doesn't shoot in ProRes or if it doesn't have an HDMI out port? So something to think about. Just knowing that you're only going to be able to use B-RAW. And for me, personally, I'm not a Blackmagic editor. excuse me, I'm not a DaVinci Resolve editor. It's not my favorite program to edit in. I've used it plenty of times. I've used it when shooting on Blackmagic cameras because I wanted to take advantage of B-RAW, but it's not usually how I run. Now, you should be able to import B-RAW into Premiere Pro and still make adjustments, but it doesn't go into Final Cut Pro. I'm using pretty much all the editors now. I'm like on a day-to-day basis, I'm jumping between Final Cut Pro and Premiere Pro, sometimes DaVinci, but not nearly as much. And it gets a little confusing. It's like, oh, wrong shortcut, wrong shortcut. I don't know if you guys have that issue. Anyways, going on a tangent about switching between editors constantly and like trying to do the wrong shortcuts because you're switching editors all the time. But yeah, so that was something for me with the PYXIS 6K that was like, dude, come on, give us ProRes. But I should have asked them about that. I didn't know that when I was actually at NAB. Otherwise, I would have drilled the engineers about that too. Like, what the heck? Where'd ProRes go? So let's see. Man, I think we've covered a good majority of this. If you guys have any questions about this or other things while we're on the live, definitely let me know. I want to make sure that we kind of hit all your questions about the PYXIS 6K. We've talked a little bit about the price. It is $3,000 USD. So it's definitely not a really cheap camera, but it's not the most expensive. There are Sony cameras in just, you know, the A7R 4s of the world and those sort of cameras that are more expensive than this, and they're just small mirrorless DSLR type cameras. So the $3,000 price point I do feel like is pretty good. It's definitely more expensive than their Pocket lineup, which you just saw some of them go on sale for only $1,500, which was just insane. But most of them are about that $2,000 range. So it's definitely a good price point. It's not entry level. I definitely feel like they're going for kind of an indie filmmaker style here where it's like, hey, you've been doing this for a while. You want to get into like the cinema camera world, but you're not ready to drop money on something like the Sony FX6, or you don't want to, it's expensive. Like, this was a big investment for me. And, you know, I love this camera, but it was very expensive and a big investment for my company. So this is a good like entry level into the cinema camera style, that body where you can throw a big battery on the back, have all the controls on the side, that sort of thing. So I definitely think that this is a good price point for that if you're looking for that. And the image is beautiful. We haven't talked about it yet because we're only talking about the specs. I know people sometimes give crap to me or other YouTubers about you're just talking about the specs. Well, one, I don't have the camera yet. It's not out, and I can't actually shoot with it. I haven't seen a single other person shoot with it yet. I've seen no one actually hands-on shoot with this. Just playing with it at NAB, seeing what I can see there. The footage looks nice, and it's basically the same sensor as the Cine 6K from Blackmagic, so that full frame Cine 6K. So really the image should look basically identical in terms of color science. The resolution is the same, basically everything about it. So one thing I will say is that this camera is nicely set up, to do, trying to get to my screen share here so I can show you some of the different aspect ratios. So something really nice about this is, of course, you can shoot in all different frame rates, but you can shoot in different aspect ratios. So let's see if I can find it here. I feel like it's 10 times harder to find things when I'm live. I'm like, where'd that go? Let's see. Okay, resolutions and frame rates. Where is it? This might be it. Okay, so you can shoot in a couple different modes here. Here we go. So open gate. So open gate, I'm sure you've heard a lot of people talking about this recently as it gets more popular, is this 3:2 style. It's a little bit more rectangular, or I guess more square. It's a little bit more squared up, and that's shooting across the whole resolution. So this 6,000 by 4,000 resolution. So you're getting a lot of ability to do reframing in post-production. So if you want to go vertical, you can kind of see it here. They've got some crosshairs. You know, you'll be able to just reframe it for vertical, or you can reframe it and have it more 16 by 9. So it's really, really nice to be able to shoot fully open gate, get the full resolution, and actually, take advantage of that nice 6K sensor. But of course, they have many other options. So for instance, here's their anamorphic mode. So you could see that it squares it up. It does use a little bit less of the sensor, but this is really nice because a lot of cameras don't have anamorphic modes, but Blackmagic has been really good about having anamorphic modes. The first camera I ever shot anamorphic on was my Blackmagic 6K Pro, and I used the Atlas Anamorphics because it had anamorphic mode. It was the camera that made the most sense. So this is great that you can still use, most of the sensor, and it's 4K resolution. You can see it's 4,832 by 4,032. So you're still getting a 4K image with anamorphic, which a lot of times you don't get. Depending on the sensor, you'll have to zoom in a ton and like crop out a lot because it gets way, way too wide, which is unusable. So this lets you zoom in, or you don't have to zoom in and lose some of that resolution. I've even seen sometimes when shooting anamorphic on certain cameras that you get down to like maybe 1080p resolution after all of the loss of on the sensor and zooming in and everything. So they did this with anamorphic in mind, which I absolutely love. And then, they've got all the normal resolutions, 6K, and then Super 35 mode. So if you want to use your Super 35 lenses, you can. I heard get a drink here. And then they have 1080p mode, which you can see is like super, super windowed, barely uses any of the sensor at all. And they're going to be super zoomed in. So definitely will make most of your lenses completely unusable if you're going to use 1080p mode. I just wouldn't do it. I don't know why you would. So yeah, you're probably going to want to stick mostly with open gate, or you're just classic 6K, 6K image DCI. So yeah, I think it's a pretty exciting camera. I'm happy to see them come out with a box camera that is in the affordable range, and it has some downsides. We've all talked about that a lot. Like, the different monitor on the side, no variable ND filters. Those things, a lot of people see those as downsides, and I can definitely see that. But the camera has a great build quality to it. It has full frame sensor, has B-RAW 6K. Like, it has a lot of the right things going for it. We've just got to get our hands on it and see if it's good. So. And yeah, I see in the comments here, you guys are still talking about, or we're talking about the sensor readout, saying it was pretty bad. And that's what I heard. I was wondering the same thing. I haven't heard that yet. Honestly, I'm not sure who's shooting on this camera because it's not out yet. So I don't know who knows what this actual sensor readout is. I can't imagine that it's any worse than the Blackmagic Pocket Cine cameras. And I've never had issues with those in terms of readout. So if it's worse than those, obviously that's a problem. But if it's the same as the Pocket Cine camera lineup, I see no issue with it at all. I think it'll be totally fine. So yeah, I'm definitely excited about this camera to get my hands on it, play with it, actually shoot some real footage with the new Blackmagic PYXIS 6K. So what do you guys think? Do you have any other questions about it? I know, maybe just a tiny bit more from you guys after playing with it and using it, but like at NAB, but that's it. Other than that, everything that I can see, everything I can see online, you guys can see. So just love to chat with you guys anymore if there's other parts about it that you're wondering about. As far as the actual menus and everything, I didn't talk about this, but they're identical to the Blackmagic Pocket Cine lineup. The menus work exactly the same. They work great. Got all the normal sliders, quickly just adjusting between white balance, ISO, frame rates, everything. It's normal touchscreen. So if you've used those cameras in the past and you're really familiar with the operating system, the Blackmagic operating system, then this is going to be exactly the same. No issues navigating around it. I thought it was really, really nice. Big touchscreen, really, really easy to use. So yeah, it's nice. It's comfortable. It's nice always when camera companies release their new cameras and the operating system is familiar, easy to use. So there won't be no learning curve. You could literally pick this camera up and use it, or go pick up a Blackmagic Pocket Cine camera and use it and have no issues switching between them because it's literally the exact same operating system. So sometimes it's really hard switching between cameras or brands or whatever, but when they do it like this and they make the operating systems identical, it's just so easy, which I love, especially if you're someone that wants to upgrade to this camera, the Pixus 6K. It's going to be an easy upgrade because there's nothing new to learn. There's no new learning curve. So I absolutely love that. All right. And yeah, Nick saying, can't wait to see what accessories are released for it. And hey, what's up, Starvey? Yeah, it's definitely something that I'm excited to see. I haven't seen any announcements yet. Usually Small Rig is one of the first ones that I've seen come out with accessories, and then Tilta usually follows after that with a little bit more finesse and design sometimes. So we'll see. We'll see what accessories come out. I think there will be a bunch, different like side plates and grips and cages and things like that. All the things that you would normally expect. I think we're going to get them all. And yeah, it's going to be a really nice camera to test out, play with, see what the footage is like. And, you know, hopefully it ends up being a really great camera that everyone kind of adopts. You know, if this is the right camera for you, if you've been looking for, I wouldn't call it an entry-level cinema camera. I think that's what some of the Pocket Cine Cams are, but kind of a mid-range Cine camera at that $3,000 US price point with all the in and out ports, SDI professional ports, and then of course everything else it's got going for it. Blackmagic RAW, full frame, 6K sensor and everything. So really, really great camera. I'm excited to see where things go, how the footage is used. And yeah, it's great to have you guys all joining me on the live stream today. It's been a couple months since I've done one of these. I'm going to try and do live streams more frequently again. I used to do them almost every month. Got to get back to that. It's been busy. If you guys aren't familiar, I am a co-founder of a startup called Skyglass. I always want to plug this so you guys can go check it out. But it's called Skyglass, and it is a virtual production app. I know they didn't do a very good job of showing what it is, but it's a virtual production app. We have a ton of different environments in there, so you can pull any of these up. They're all from Unreal Engine, and it'll allow you to put yourself basically into a 3D world. And so you can film everything on your phone using Unreal Engine. So it's virtual production just like The Mandalorian used with Unreal Engine, but it's on your iPhone or on an iPad. So if you haven't yet, go check out Skyglass on the App Store. It's only for iOS, but I'll put a link to it here in the chat, skyglass.com. So I'm a co-founder of that. We created this app, and yeah, really want you guys to check that out, make videos with it in Unreal Engine, full 3D environments. And if you want me to talk more about this on this channel or do a live stream or something, I can definitely do that. But it's something I'm really excited about and that I do full time working on this app. So check out Skyglass. Yeah, and I think that's kind of it, guys. I'm excited to see this thing come out in about 2 weeks. Sounds like it might be June 19th. Blackmagic PYXIS 6K is launching. We'll see how it goes. I'm excited to actually get my hands on it and film with it and see how it is really, really working with this camera on a job. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll have another live stream. Hopefully it's sooner than a month out. Try and get these a little bit more regular again. All right, guys, I will catch you in the next one. Have a good one. See you later.